Canadian musician. With us this evening, Paul Koehler, drummer and manager for Silverstein, manager with Tandem Management Company. Yeah, we're thrilled to have Paul here. He and I actually connected for a panel on touring at Canadian Music Week a few years. I really enjoyed his perspective. I mean, the band's played close to 2,500 shows in more countries than I can count. Well over 1 million records sold, and actually just came off of a huge tour in support of the 15th anniversary of their record When Broken Is Easily Fixed. Yeah, it was just gushing to Paul about that one being an important one for my musical education. If you're not familiar with Silverstein, do check them out. And here we go. Quick overview. So we're jumping in kind of assuming that the dates are booked. I mean, yeah, we could have 17 webinar sessions on how to book and organize your tour. And with that too, our conversation here is pretty wide reaching. If at any point you want us to put a question in front of Paul, use there. It may say that your comment is in for approval. Don't worry, it's in front of me and we'll put it in front of Paul. Halfway through, we'll open up some questions, touch on anything pertinent or topical to what we've been talking about. If we don't get to your question then, though, don't worry, because we'll do a wider reaching and longer Q&A at the end. Yeah, Paul has been gracious to volunteer his time here, so throw anything at us, even if it goes a bit outside of our topic here. But talk a bit about budgeting, namely saving money on the road and avoiding costly pitfalls. Talk a bit about promotion, getting some buzz, getting people out to your dates, media opportunities, etc. We'll talk about just being a good hang in the van, which I think fair to say can make or break many a tour and many a band. We'll talk a bit about when you are at the venue for a given show date, some things to keep in mind to make sure that you're maximizing your impact and return on your investment. And well, there you go, return on investment, making sure that once all is said and done, you've come away with this with new fans, data, etc. So we'll jump into it. Fire your questions at any point during the session. Don't worry about interrupting, because you won't. That's what I'm here for. And yeah, Paul, thank you. I've been sucking a lot of air here. Appreciate you joining us. And I guess fill us in. What's keeping you busy personally, professionally, a couple months into 2019?
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. I appreciate being here, and thanks for having me. Yeah, it's been a pretty crazy and dynamic year so far. Kind of started like halfway through this anniversary tour, like you mentioned. We got the second leg at the beginning of January. So I was on tour for a few weeks, and then came home and kind of shifted more into just the full-time management, vibe as I'm not on tour, which I still do it on tour, but it's just my days are just a little bit structured differently. But yeah, it's just been pretty exciting with wrapping up that tour. It's our most successful headline tour that we've ever done in 19 years, which is pretty amazing. Was really, really happy with that. We just actually launched a re-record project that we did, like 12 songs that were re-recorded and are being self-released directly from us to fans independently, which is pretty cool. So on the Silverstein end, that's been very busy, plus gearing up for some big surprises later this year and into next, both on touring and recording stuff as well. So keeping pretty busy in general on the Silverstein end. And then with my other management clients, just launched a new artist, Dying and Designer, which has taken off rapidly in kind of the emo rap space, which is like very exciting. I have, Trash Goods on tour in UK, Europe. I have Whole Close just wrapped up a North American tour, preparing for another one. Just picked up another artist, Vagrants, who are just starting to ramp up as well. So it's all over the map. All the bands doing different stuff, and it's really exciting to be involved with so many careers at the moment.
And I didn't. Silversteinmusic.com is the home base for Paul's band, if you want to check it out. But here we go. Again, we're casting a wide net here, but I guess I'm going to pick at some of the things that I'm personally interested in, or that I know that we get a lot of questions about. But yeah, let's get started here. Assuming this is someone's first tour, or maybe they're a few in, but you're not at a level where anyone outside of the musicians and, beyond the van to date to date kind of thing. But yeah, like when you're putting together, if you're planning to go on a multi-date run, you're going to be away from home for at least a few nights in a row. Chat a little bit about here, like when you guys were just getting started, maybe first and foremost, like at what stage is it that you want to consider venturing out on a tour? Like what do you need to have in place, especially in your own local area, before you want to worry about taking on the risk and expenses of taking the project on the road.
Yeah, I mean, again, there's so many points I can kind of touch on. It's different for us because when we started 19 years ago, the only real way to build a fan base was by getting in front of them in a room and playing your music and hopefully selling the CD directly to that person, and that's how you build a fan base for life. Where nowadays, because we
Mm.
have all this data and these metrics and all of this, like the social platforms and Spotify and all those things, we can literally like reach people with the music, build up those fan bases, and then see where the demand is, and then plan tours around that if you want. Or sometimes people are cherry picking a few markets where they see that, then they are like, okay, well, I want to play some other places, and we can kind of branch out. So it's pretty interesting differences that technology has brought into play when it comes to planning out a tour, where you should go, and that kind of stuff. But just to kind of be more specific, and I think that is regardless of whether you're playing small, VFW halls or you're doing a theater tour or whatever, the most important thing is a budget. And no one told us that back in the day. And even we went through many, many years without really thinking about it. I think our mentality was always like, if we got offered tour dates, we just always said yes because we love playing music. We knew that the more tour dates, the better we got, the bigger, the more fans we got, and the bigger our career would go. So we were just always the band that would never say no to an opportunity, even without even kind of looking at the budget. We were just always like, well, I mean, if we have to make a sacrifice here financially, then we'll just use that to pay for that tour or whatever it takes. Like, we were just very eager and hungry for it.
Mm.
But like, what I think the most important thing is looking at the budget and making sure that you have startup capital to do what you're set out to do, that when you come home, even if there is profits, you look at everything you want to do in the next 6 to 12 months and make sure that you store away money for that, and you plan what your deposits might be and all those different things that will get you going on those tours. And just really look at it. Like, even if it's a really simple thing, you're getting $200 a night, you might make a few $100s of merchandise. You got a tank of gas you got to fill, maybe some food for the band and crew. Like, those are just simple numbers that you can jot down and realize at the end of the day, okay, like, if we put that all together, we netted $100. Okay, if we do that 7 times this week, that's $700. Okay, that's something that we can manage and understand, and not just like get through a tour and look at each other and say, hey man, we can't afford to pay for gas to get home. We can't afford to pay our merch debt or whatever. It's very important to be thinking about the budget at any level. And, you can predict some stuff, and then the stuff that you can't, build in a contingency or store some money away for a rainy day. Just be very aware of your numbers and try to learn from them. And it'll actually make you even smarter and do things more efficiently as you continue on.
Mm. Speaking from your experience, or maybe secondhand with other acts that you've worked with or toured with, but even if we're talking, $100 profit a night, like, how realistic is it that you can, in one of those first few tours that you embark on, come away without losing money, let alone turn a profit? Like, is that kind of a necessary reality of this game, or can people doing this intelligently, even if it is that early on and they're playing in brand new markets for the first time, like, is there a means of making it so that you're not taking an inherent bath?
Yeah, I mean, I think for the very first couple of years of a lot of artists, unless you're riding some huge wave and things are just blowing up quickly, everything you're doing is reinvesting into your business of your band. So even if there is profits, you're just saying like, okay, now we have this amount of money. Let's go a little bit further on the next tour. Let's go overseas, or let's do this or that. Like, let's maybe invest in some more merch designs. Okay, like you're like you're paying yourself last in a lot of these cases. You're basically realizing that all of the profits and all the early success needs to be all reinvested to be able to grow it. Especially when things are growing, you just need to do more and more. It's like putting fuel on fire. It's like when it's burning, you don't want to let it go out. So, and fuel is the money.
Hmm.
So you just have to use your profits. So it can be very difficult. It can be challenging for people, like some people that tour so much just kind of like, well, I live on the road. I don't really need to make money. But then some people are like, well, I need to be able to pay my bills when I get home. If I'm not making money on the road, how do I do that? So it can be a challenge, and even working with different artists. I mean, they all come from different backgrounds and different economic situations. So you just have to kind of work with them, and then that's where budgeting becomes important. Where you have to, if you get presented with a tour, and you're like, listen, I can't afford this. The band can't afford it. The label will not give us the right tour support that we need to be able to do it. So you just have to be really cautious and reinvest as much as you can, I guess.
Mhm. So obviously your budget is going to dictate whether you are in a position to bring someone outside of who's going to be on stage along. Now, again, speaking from the outside looking in, I've never been on tour. I'd like to think I've been around them enough to be able to say, typically it seems that the first bit of hired help that you get is either in the form of a front of house audio engineer or a tour manager to manage your day-to-day, or, as I think is very common, one person doing both roles and merch salesman on top of that, or saleswoman. All this to ask though, like, at what stage, say for you guys, was it before you brought someone out on tour? And with that, like, do you advise, is one of those areas maybe more important or more integral to delivering shows, having someone handling your sound, having that extra help, like dedicated focus to managing your time schedule, etc.?
Yeah, so I mean, I'd say the case with us and with pretty much most bands like in this genre of music, the merchandise person is usually number one, because it's the one thing you can't physically do. If you're on stage, you can't sell your t-shirts at the same time. And at that stage where all merchandise sales are like, it's like the lifeblood of tour.
Yeah.
It's the one time where you just need someone there hustling the merchandise as much as you can. And still, even in the early days for us and for any artist that I work with, I say, like, please go to your merch table, please get behind there and shake hands with the fans, take photos with them, try to, like, come get them to come over and talk to you. Just like try to be a bit of a used car salesman for the early years while you're building that fan base, and make yourself accessible. But the merch person is usually the most valuable one at the beginning. It usually starts as a friend. I know with us, it started with friends. We kind of rotate our best friends in and out, depending whoever had time to leave for a couple of weeks at a time. Even bands I work with, a lot of them, they bring one of their friends at the beginning. Maybe they end up becoming a full-time merch person. They might actually make a career out of it. So I know a lot of career merch people that started that way and actually worked their way up. Um, Aside from that, and what I always say, as things grow, it's like quality of show. You eventually get to a level where you want to be able to put on a certain level of show, and you want to sound good. So like you mentioned, the front of house audio engineer is a very important one. If you're tight on budget or space, a lot of times you do try to combine the tour management and front of house into one person, so you're not paying two people and taking up two spots, whether it be on the bus or in the van. So that is a very common thing. For Silverstein, we've most always had one person doing both of those jobs. Those jobs I find are fairly independent of one another. When you're
Yeah.
playing, tour manager doesn't really have much to do unless they have bookkeeping to do, and a good TM front of house will kind of just work independently on those two jobs throughout the day. So that's always a very important thing. So like if you're getting to a level like, okay, you're a small band, you've been playing tiny bars, but now you just got a national tour playing to thousands of people a night. Probably what you're thinking is, well, we need to make sure we sound good, because that's the one thing we can't control either. Is that you're on stage, we have no idea what's coming out of the speakers. So that's again an investment in your band. Like you might even be profitable in using your profits, which I mean, obviously you are, to hire that person, realizing that maybe sounding better will make more fans and will generate more income in the future. So those are definitely like
Mhm.
two important roles. And again, on the quality of performance angle, it gets to the point where like, man, we use all these crazy guitar tunings. We need a guitar tech so that we're not stopping in between every song. It's like it's about being more professional up there. We need someone that can, if a guitar breaks, they can give it to us. We don't have to stop playing, like that kind of stuff. And I always advocate for that, is like, it's like even with Silverstein, we could probably just get up there without any crew, but we want to put on a quality of show that like sometimes there will be issues, but we try to hide them so much that fans don't even realize. And there's people behind the scenes literally running back and forth to fix it. so that we can give you the best quality show without you realizing that there's ever been an issue.
Hmm. Um, yeah, I've got travel here. I mean, to that note about budgeting, whether it's a van, whether it's your mom's minivan, I know bands that have toured in Honda Civics. I guess that one's kind of going to be unique to each person's situation. And as far as accommodations, I mean, yeah, crash on floors, can crash on couches. There's kind of some of those obvious ones that go with the lore of the DIY tour. But on the note of accommodations, like maybe you, even at this stage, any tips on maybe things people might not think of that could be kind of the happy medium between sleeping in some stranger or a friend's basement from city to city versus having rooms at the Delta for everybody?
Yeah, I mean, I've done it all. We in the early years, in the very beginning, it was kind of tough. Like we didn't have money, and it was tough to find anywhere to stay. So we slept a lot of nights in the van, and it was an experience. It was like five of us and like our friends, so six of us sleeping in this tiny little van. In times of the year where it got pretty cold or pretty hot. So that's definitely an experience. And there was many times, where have to drive overnight. So you're just sleeping and driving overnight, because you have to be able to get to the next show. We definitely tried to stay with as many random people to save money. We would just put a sign at our merch table, or our singer would say something on stage like, "Hey, looking for a place to stay tonight? We'll be out early in the morning, just looking for somewhere to sleep, maybe take a shower, use some internet if we can." That's it. And we actually met a lot of cool people that way. It helped us save a lot of money. There's obviously you get to a level where you have either too many people in your entourage, or maybe it's not the most comfortable, but you try to do it as long as you can. And I push young bands still to do it as much as you can. There's some really good tour managers that build networks of people, so they know in each city who they stay with, and it becomes kind of like an information exchange, and they trade contacts. And there becomes a good, now with the internet, like in the early days the internet was very primitive when we were first touring, but nowadays, like, yeah, there's probably like Facebook groups and messaging stuff like that help out young bands, so they can actually find places to stay, which is pretty cool, and actually plan it in advance, almost like you're booking a hotel. And I will say sometimes staying with people was a lot nicer. They make you breakfast sometimes. You'd have more space than just one hotel room for all of you. Like sometimes they'd have a pool. You'd have, like TV, all that kind of stuff. So it actually had some pretty interesting experiences.
Okay. Thanks, Ed, for the feedback there. Apparently, I'm a lot louder than Paul. I will adjust that here. I guess last one then before we jump off into promotion, but I guess it covers two of these as far as hidden overlooked costs or just avoiding unnecessary expenses. But yeah, you mentioned, building a contingency fee into your budget. What are some of those things that, in your experience, could catch an inexperienced band off guard? I mean, obviously, there's tons of stories about bands breaking down or, God forbid, like getting stuff stolen from you on the road. But, as far as things that maybe are less nefarious and that people just might not think of, are there some of those hidden overlooked cost things people just don't think of that might end up kind of chipping away at your bottom line if you're not careful?
I think it really depends on the scale of the tour, part of the world, all that different stuff that's maybe going on. You might, one thing that maybe people aren't even thinking about is like you could have budgeted your tour. You could be, moving along. You could end up selling more merch than you expected, run out, and now you need to front a new reorder, and you might not have thought about that. And your money might be tied up in a tour, and you can't afford to get more merchandise on the road. That could be one thing. Or you need to overnight merch and you can't pay for the shipping, or it's too expensive because you didn't plan ahead. That can be one thing that comes up a lot of the times, if you're not projecting your merchandise sales and running numbers on that. Obviously breakdowns, that kind of stuff. Um, I mean, just yeah, the kind of the unfortunate things that they can happen on any kind of tour. But having a contingency is good, and also not relying on merch sales. A lot of people, even if they kind of have a consistent merch sale, they plan for that, but but remove merch from your budget and see what that does. Looking just at the basics like guarantee and any rentals, and maybe overshooting what your gas expenses might be, and maybe building all of your crew and stuff like that, just so you can kind of see, because yeah, merch can be a really unexpected thing, both on the cost of goods and how much you actually end up selling.
Okay. Yeah, if there are any questions to do with budgeting, money, hit that up, and yeah, hit me with those. And there were a couple things there that Paul touched on too that we'll chat about a bit later in the venue and return on investment. So yeah, rest assured we'll revisit a couple of those. But again, a bit of a sampling here on promo. So we're working with the assumption that you've got your dates booked and you know where you're playing and when. So yeah, and again, it's interesting. I mean, I did think of this that when you guys started 19 years ago, the internet was pretty primitive. Silverstein's career arc is pretty much timed perfectly, you know, with the development of all these promotional tools, social media. So the landscape's very different now than when you started. But yeah, all this to ask, like, oh, I've got a bunch of bullet points here. We don't have to jump on all of them, but some ideas for maybe in the middle years when the internet was more what it is today, but you guys weren't at the level that you are now. What are some of the means of DIY promo, getting people out to your dates in different cities, especially cities where maybe you don't have much of a presence? And yeah, just any tips for that. And then I guess hiring a publicist after that. So yeah, as far as things that you can do on your own, any best practices that you've stumbled upon?
Yeah, I mean, I'll kind of jump in maybe more of like in today, because like obviously when we started, social media wasn't where it is. It wasn't really even a thing. I mean, MySpace hit around our first full length, and that was only really good for our types of bands because that was the subculture that was using the site the most. So like, luckily we were playing the sound of music that users on that site were engaging with. So that grew us, and we had a little network, and you can kind of promote internally with that. But we were kind of going from the point when print was king for advertising anything, national tours, albums, even on the local level, you wanted to get everything into print to be able to promote, as well as interviews. It was like press and print advertising as a way to promote your tours. Up to today, there's so many great tools built into all of the social media that bands are building for themselves. You can run very specific targeted advertisements on like Facebook and Instagram that are really, really effective if you are properly engaging right with your fans, that you're building your assets in the aesthetic that connects with them, that your messaging is there, that you are make sure that you're hitting the right demographic for that particular, say, concert ticket or album launch or whatever it is. It's really, really interesting how that stuff can work. Even on an individual show basis, I'll go right to the promoter and we'll use their social media, our social media. We'll maybe do some contesting, maybe an interview, maybe a takeover, a shout out video that we'll boost together. Like there's so many little things that you can do that really plug into the metrics and the algorithms of these platforms that are directed to the actual people that would be, consuming this. So if you're really trying to say, sell a ticket in Connecticut, you're targeting the fans of Silverstein and like-minded artists in Connecticut, and you're working with that promoter, and you're monitoring the sales, and you're realizing the dips and the peaks, and you're taking advantage of certain days of the week where people buy tickets and all that kind of stuff. And we have so much data available with that stuff, so it's really, really important. Plus, like, everyone's on their smartphone. It's really quick and easy to build a bunch of graphics and trailers and all these ideas and teasers and blast it out to your fans immediately, or you can schedule them so they go out at a specific time. Like there's so many tools, and things happen so rapidly in 2019 in this era. So artists just need to continue to kind of stay on top of their messaging, reinvent it once in a while. I'm a big advocate of like rebranding the same idea so that it looks fresh, and then if it missed some people, maybe this will strike a chord with them and they'll understand it and be excited, maybe want to buy an album or buy a ticket or whatever it is, or even just go and stream some music. But we're in a place of a lot of easy information exchange, and people that are tapping into it efficiently and using it correctly are having a lot of success. So and it's fun too. It's like, as an artist, it should be fun to launch something and announce something and have immediate feedback, and to be able to engage with those people and have, you know, an ear to the fan base immediately, and be able to have that kind of valuable feedback to steer your decisions. I mean, you don't have to listen to them, but just to have the option to do that, it's pretty cool.
Nice. A quick plug, nwcwebinars.com. We did a session a few months ago with Rick Barker, music industry consultant, and that one's called Killer Record Release Strategies, but I cite it because part of that was Rick sharing his screen, basically back end of Facebook ads, showing off just how specific you can target those and some best practices which could easily apply to tour promo. So check that one out if you want a bit more. I mean, there's tons of resources out there about using Facebook effectively, but this one does come from the perspective of the music business. Pro tip. So yeah, I've got Publicist here with a question mark, and yeah, I guess I'll kind of ask the loaded question to save time. So, but please correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah, knowing what you'd pay for a strong publicity campaign around a multi-day tour, like, is that something that bands starting out at this stage should even be considering? Again, we're probably talking like $2,000 or $3,000 in a lot of cases. Yeah, what are your thoughts? What did you guys do? What have some of your clients done in that regard?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you're totally right. I mean, you know, a decent publicist can run you $2,000 a month. You know, could maybe $2,000 for 3 months. You know, it can be $6,000 for 3 months. It can really, and that's not even for your like top company. You know, those are people that are going to grind it, you know, and work really hard and be in the thick with you. You know, some really good indie publicists that I love working with, but it's expensive. That's a lot of money, and I really don't. I don't see a lot of value on the publicity side until like there's a label involved and there's a release plan. Even, you know, you kind of need music out so that they're working an album campaign simultaneously with a touring campaign, because the two things are going to intermingle very quickly. When you're going to more and more markets, that's where your publicist can do more stuff, because on the national reach, it's going to be very limited. It might be very one time. It might be, you know, on the tip of the album launch, you might get some national press or interviews or something like that. But it's when you play 40 different markets, you may end up getting an interview with each one of those, or you might get a review or a photographer coming out, or all these little things. So you might end up with like 100 or so press little bits from a national tour, and on an album campaign, you got 5. So it's really a cost that I think only makes sense when there's a label behind a release. You're like into a campaign, and for that, you're literally just, you know, for the developing acts, you're literally just like trying anything and everything to get some publicity. You're like, anything is a win at that level. You'll have goals probably, different angles, but you're just trying to get your name in as many little pockets as possible. And for me, I think there's no such thing as like small press or big press. I think it's all just good press. And like, I'm always an advocate for my band or any artist I work with. Like, you know, even if somebody has a blog with 500 followers, like, why can't you just spend 20 minutes, do the interview? You know, they'll probably become even a bigger fan of you. You know, who knows where they'll be in 5 to 10 years? They'll remember that interview for the rest of their life. That's a really exciting opportunity for both of you. And just to have that asset of publicity is so valuable when building a career.
All right, on. And again, I'll stop doing this, but for media opportunities, nwcwebinars.com, maximize your media coverage. Some great tips in there too. It'll just really build and round out what we're touching on here. I guess one more before I leave this, and this just came to me here, but yeah, like I remember Warped Tour maybe 10 years ago, you almost couldn't escape it at merch tents that there would be some sort of like download an exclusive track or get our latest album in exchange for your email address. Like, it seemed that a captive mailing list was critical for a lot of these bands' success, or at least that they saw a ton of value in having one. But yeah, here we are, and I mean, Silverstein, over 1 million Facebook fans, which kudos, by the way. That's a lot more than some comparatively bigger CanCon acts. But all this to ask, like, is that email address, email address, is that still a valuable tool for you guys for other acts in an age of social media where, a lot of these platforms kind of have built-in networks that are easier to manage? I don't know about whether they're more effective, but yeah, is that still something that you put weight in?
Yeah, it's actually I'm become a very big advocate for it, and I'm saying it's even more valuable than it ever has, especially with privacy laws changing. Europe specifically has really strict ones, and the ability to target is becoming limited on a global scale, and even in some cases illegal. So you're not going to be able to always effectively mass target people that you think should be advertised to. So the number one way to do that is have people opt into, on their own regard, into a mailing list. They say, yes, I want to sign up for. Now you have direct access to them. And as long as you're not abusing that in sending them an email every day, but sending real valuable information and maybe insider info or early access to tickets or just like coupon codes or whatever you want to send them on the mailing list, those people will stick with you, and that's a valuable thing. And now again, back to data, we can see conversion rates, we can see click rates, we can see what those things actually turn into. You can say, man, I sent an email to the mailing list and that converted into 500 ticket sales last night. That's amazing. Like that, you have all of that data accessible these days, and it's really valuable. And I say your mailing list is your most trusted, I guess, asset in that case.
Right on. So yeah, a few questions, and actually there was one that's right on that point. Yeah, Paul, I don't want to assume that you're a lawyer, but maybe you can speak from your own experience, and I will wager an assumption here, as dangerous as that is. But yeah, there's a question: do Canadian anti-spam laws apply to artists? Is that something that you've encountered in any shape or form since that legislation came in 2 or 3 years ago?
I haven't seen anything like that. I just personally, as far as anything like mailing lists and stuff like that, like it's like we use MailChimp. It's a pretty industry standard for like subscribing, unsubscribing. I think it's a pretty transparent platform that a lot of companies use. And then as far as the social media stuff, I'm not aware of any other spam stuff on there that's come into place. I just know with the laws that Europe passed, I think it was about a year ago, that speaking to people over there, that they were really nervous about like what they had been doing is now no longer, like they had data, like a lot of good companies were collecting so much data, they knew so much information about fans of music, where they were very effective. And they basically, the government turned around and said, like, you can't use that anymore. So they're like, you have to resort to things like mailing lists, like getting people to sign up there. And then once we have them on there, it's all legal, it's legitimate, but that was a really big struggle that's kind of shifted. And Europe tends to be a bit ahead of North America on that kind of stuff.
Bingo. Yeah, I think Paul's specifically referencing the GDPR laws that, like, even though they're specific to Europe, I know a lot of bigger companies here in North America are basically kind of trying to work within them here, just knowing that it's likely
I
that.
think you noticed, like, I think it was like April last year, whenever it was, like everyone got like 100 emails from like anything they've ever signed up for, being like, here's our policy, or here's the updates, or just letting you know this. Like, people probably remember seeing all that, and everyone's just probably like, yeah, sure, okay, delete or whatever. But that was a big shift in that, and that was a big change for companies operating on a global level.
Okay, so to that question, I will seek to get you a solid answer from a respectable lawyer. Hit me up with an email, aking@nwcworld.com. Yeah, but my assumption is, I mean, if you are a band, you are a commercial enterprise. If you are sending people solicitations like this, even if it is on a DIY tour level, yeah, that's a commercial scenario. And if someone hasn't given you explicit permission to first get their email address and second send them things, I've got to think that that would be in violation of something, whether or not that ever reported, et cetera, et cetera. I don't want to speak to that, but I think that yes, you do run the risk of, or at least those would apply to your band is a commercial enterprise, but we will firm that up. Another great question here, and again, fire these in as they come to you. Paul, is that something that that you guys have some experience with?
So I think I missed the first part of that. What was the question?
Well, applying for grants for touring or tour support grants from one of the many industry associations. The question is like, what are some things to keep in mind for the budget that you're presenting if you're applying for any type of tour support grant from a association, and basically if you have any ideas to what the people that administer those grants are looking for from a solid budget / tour plan?
Yeah, so in Canada, and you're obviously probably very familiar too, there's like the different grants revenue streams. Some are private and some are public sector. And particularly like in Ontario, we have like Ontario Creates, which is a very big one, that's doing all sorts of touring funding, recording funding. I mean, they're even in the film industry, like they're in all of the arts from like every aspect of it funding, and they're funding it on a more company business development angle. So that's one that's based on return of investment, growth, business enterprising, job creation. That's a very specific one. Is like as a band goes from being a bunch of musicians playing music to becoming a business that is sustaining jobs. That is a sector that or a grant system that supports that sector in a whole different light. That is very numbers based. Like really to emphasize, return of investment is their number one goal, which is cool because it's an economy booster for Ontario, and that's what they're doing, and they're supporting arts, so I love it. Aside from that, the big one that I think everyone is familiar with as well is like the Radio Star Maker, which is tour support as well as marketing. And on the tour support side, basically they want to take artists that are buzzing, that today are playing to 150 people, but those 150 people are very excited, and hopefully in 2 to 3 years they're playing to 1,500 people. And by investing in that artist and giving them that tour support, they are going to be a success story. So they want to be part of the trajectory, and that's why they have like thresholds about like how big of a venue you can be playing and be eligible, what part of the bill where they want to see improvement and increase and that kind of stuff. So they want to be there from like during the growth period. That's what they're really looking for. From my own experience with them, from talking to them, from having applications get denied as well as get approved, they're really all about the growth. They want to be behind the artist that's getting a few million streams on Spotify, but hasn't really connected at the club level yet. And then what they do, they're a poster artist for that revenue stream. That's a really big thing. So that's where there's buzz and there's growth and there's a lot of tour dates. That's stuff that they can get behind. And as long as you're not repeating the same tour ideas and plans time and time again, they may continue to grow with you and support you over time at that. And additionally to that, there's Factor, which I think a lot of people are familiar with as well. Everything from like, recording loans to tour support to marketing, all that kind of stuff. And they're a real like infrastructure that's kind of supporting artists in like the whole 360 of it all. You may get some recording money from them, some touring money, some marketing, some kind of video budgets. And, the more you kind of do together with them, I think the more successful and the more chance of getting approvals on that stuff. If they fund a recording, they're most likely going to fund some touring, that kind of stuff. So those are kind of the three different streams that I'm familiar with that we have utilized at different points in our career.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess I can just build on what you were saying there as someone that's adjudicated for a number of these associations. But there are some organizations, like Paul say, where they're very business focused, and as he said, basically their interest is turning you into taxpayers. In which case, if whether it's recoupable or not, they're going to be looking at that budget. How realistic is this? How well, I guess realistic is the word. But like logically, is this laid out? Is that a reasonable amount of revenue to expect, blah, blah. There are some, and I don't think this applies to touring as much as recording, but there are some associations that are art focused and more about, less about the bottom line and more about spurring good art and creativity. And I guess that's one to know when you're prepping your application is, okay, are they looking to see potential return on investment here? Are they looking to see that I've got all my shit in order? Or are they looking to support me so that I can keep making music and not so concerned on the other side? Anyway, yeah, we'll keep rolling here. Keep the questions coming. I realize we're catching up to the hour mark here too. So we're going to talk about in the van at the venue. We've already touched on a few of these just in the first half of the presentation. Inevitably, it all kind of boils together in one big pot. But yeah, I guess just some more fun anecdotes here. I've got them all laid out. I don't know if any one of these you want to jump on first, but any even general tips, whether they touch on these or not, but for, making sure that you're not trying to kill each other a few days into a tour, maybe some best practices that you've learned about giving people space, making sure everyone gets along, splitting up the driving. Cast a wide net on it.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I guess from preparation side, one thing I can kind of say when you're planning to go on tour, whether it be making sure you have enough guitar strings for the whole tour, enough drumsticks, have enough, shampoo or whatever you need to get through your daily regimen. Just prepare to have like the basic necessities of what you need to be able to go on stage every night and to take care of yourself. Because a lot of times, touring will take you to corners of the world that you didn't know existed, that may not have a grocery store, everything might be closed the day you're there. So to be prepared, even with snacks, all that kind of stuff is just like super valuable, and it just prevents a lot of issues that might come up. As far as like making sure you have personal stuff, I'd say a nice pair of headphones is good. You put those in, you don't realize that you're surrounded by a bunch of your bandmates sometimes. That's pretty nice. And as far as pitching in, it is like a household, whether it be splitting the duties on the drive to keep everyone safe, having a buddy system so you have a co-pilot up there that's at least awake with you, DJing the music, unloading the trailer in the van, making sure people are all kind of grabbing a case, helping one another out, just doing shifts at the merch table, just making sure that everyone's kind of pitching in a little bit. It'll prevent any kind of things from boiling over. Everyone will kind of appreciate one another. And if you all do a little bit, then it makes everyone's workload way less than if one person just does it all, or a couple people do most of it. So yeah, and then another thing too about you mentioned here, good conduct. I think it goes without saying, but just treat everyone you encounter with the most respect, because most likely a lot of the venues you play, you'll probably go back at least once or twice. Sometimes you deal with promoters that literally book bars right up to arenas, and they could be with you for your whole career. There's some promoters that Silverstein's used for like 15 plus years in the same market, and have done 15 to 20 shows, maybe more, with us. So to keep that good relationship going is very important. Thanking them for stuff, being easy to work with. You can still ask for things, or ask for help or whatever when needed. Just having a good relationship with those people, and then other people that you meet, other bands, other crew members that you meet. It's funny how many stories I have of like people that I toured with a band and they had this guy selling merch, and then now he's running a record label. There's stuff like that. And you're like, man, it's a good thing that we kept on good terms, because they're in a pretty powerful position right now, and we have mutual respect for one another. It's just really smart to kind of think long term with all of this stuff, and hope that you all kind of grow together.
Oh, very good point, and that leads us perfectly into the next bit about at the venue. I will say though, as far as travel tips, and I got to give credit for this idea. I don't remember who told it to me though, but a few months ago, just in talking about these subjects, someone mentioned to me that they've had a ton of luck on like backpacker forums and like road trip, like travel forums that aren't unique to the music industry, but rather like people that are looking to explore the world on a budget, that they got a ton of tips that they've been able to use to tour smart and on the cheap. So there's one for you, is find these online communities of travelers, and you can apply a lot of those best practices to your tours or your live
I,
dates.
I will say, I mean, yeah, like touring is kind of like camping, right? Like, you go to your like local like camping store. I mean, all the little gadgets and little things they have are like pretty much going to be could be pretty valuable. Like I used to tour with a little like really tiny air mattress that you could like, I mean, it was like an inch thick that you could like blow up, but I could throw it on any floor and it wouldn't like kill my back, So you could sleep on any floor and just be independent of like, I'm not trying to find a bed or a couch to sleep on. That was like probably like at the time like 40, $50, and I just like carried it with me whenever we went on tour. Having a sleeping bag, obviously, so having good stuff like that. All little sorts of like some people get pretty creative with what they want to cook on the road. Like whether it be making like fancy coffee with an AeroPress or like having a little burner. Some bands on summer tours, and we've done it. You bring a barbecue, and like you're not only saving money on food, you're like becoming independent. So it doesn't matter where you are in the world. There's just all those little things, those little gadgets, and little something you can pack. Having a rain jacket. Just like simple things so that you're in all climates and all environments, you can be protected.
Yeah, awesome. So yeah, at the venue here and with good conduct, I mean, Paul nailed it there, that a lot of the people you're going to interact with on a day or from on a day-to-day basis in these venues, the house sound tech is the person that's probably got more control over whether you have a good show or not. Maybe even more than the people on stage. I don't know, but they're definitely a big part of that equation. And so, yeah, as bar staff, as Paul said, it's a small industry. People talk. It's best just to be a good hang, be a good person, and that's always going to do you well. And we spoke about too a bit about merch sales earlier. Yeah, interacting with fans. I mean, Paul said it there too. Get out there, put in the FaceTime. That's where you're going to develop the closest connections. And as we've said here, and in our next issue, I should say, our next issue of Canadian Musician is our 40th anniversary commemorative issue, which I mentioned because, yeah, some of the features in there, we've got one on the era of the artistpreneur that talks a lot about some of the things we're touching on here about your basically being a commercial enterprise and how you should be treating it as such, which I mentioned like that because even in this day and age, we've been talking about all of the doors that the internet has opened, data collection, how much easier it is to have a quote unquote data driven approach to your career. But one of the things that I go over and over is despite all that, it's still the micro level interpersonal relationships that are going to dictate so much of whether or not you're successful. And those direct connections with fans, once you've converted someone to being a super fan, they're going to be with you for a long time, regardless of technological, which platform is possible, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, get out there, be a good hang. As far as collecting contacts, you heard Paul here say that one of the most valuable resources you've got as a band / business, a captive group of people that have told you they're interested in your product. Here is my information. I'm trusting you with it to keep me informed. So yeah, the merch table is very much, I guess, kind of your boardroom in a lot of senses when you're on the road. And I hope I wasn't putting words into your mouth just to bring some of the things about up to now. And yeah, again, return on investment, we've touched on some of these, but there you go. The professional contacts, these are people that you could be working with for a long time to come. Don't burn bridges, build your network with other professionals, with other bands, acts, super fans in different areas, your fans. I guess, yeah, I just want to get us to the question point here. But is there anything on this slide, Paul, that maybe bears more than just me giving a quick gloss over?
Yeah, I guess one thing just to add to that point, because a lot of people ask like, how does a band get on a tour, like a bigger tour? And to be honest, a lot of opportunities happen at the friend level. Like so many people just want to tour with their friends or tour with people that they know to be good people or stuff like that. So yeah, I think broadening your network and having good relationships with people all over the place will end up in a situation where you're getting stuff like tour offers that you didn't think you would, just because people are like, yeah, they're good people. I enjoy spending time with them. I want to do a 30-day national tour with them. So that's a very often thing, even at the big arena level. Again, that applies to artists of all sizes, really.
All right on. I guess the last one then before we jump to questions, but I've got as my last point here tour data. I mean, yeah, we talked about collecting email addresses like fan information for your mailing list, but once the dust is settled, the tour is over, like what are some of the metrics beyond your mailing list or like beyond the obvious ones, total merch revenue? What are some of the things that once the tour is over that you are looking back on well, as a band member or as a manager to gauge how successful the tour was or where potential opportunities might lie? Like, what are some things that you want people that people should be keeping open mind about or paying attention to once things are said and done to kind of build and make informed decisions about the next round?
I mean, the most the most important thing is the ticket sales, really, because that's what everyone else is comparing you against. So, and there's usually a lot of factors too. Like I know, for example, like I can look at the tour and at the end of the tour and see all the numbers and have all the finals, we call them like ticket finals. And I can look at them and say like, yeah, I know that show was on a Tuesday night. There was a snowstorm. I understand why we only sold that many tickets. Um, and that's so I'm glossing over that saying like I'm not worried about that. But in some of the stuff, and I can compare tour to tour and see the growths and see the dips and see the important information there. You can then factor, okay, what was the change in the ticket price? What was the change in the marketing? What was the differences? You know, what was the weather patterns? What were all the things that played into the case of that? But your ticket counts are definitely some of your most valuable numbers as an established artist. Unfortunately, it's kind of it's true as it is, you know.
Awesome. This has been great, and yeah, uh, not preemptive, but a big thank you now, even though we're not at the end. It's been great to tap your knowledge and expertise here. Some good questions that we will jump to. Thanks, folks, for your attentiveness and engagement here. There's some great ones. Maybe not a good question. I think it is. That was writing, not me. Is it important to tour intentionally or for a reason? I know a lot of artists in the early stages who tend to just tour for the sake of touring. Maybe this goes to what you were saying, Paul, about when you guys were getting going and like especially in the punk, hardcore, metalcore, etc. scene, there was really no better way to start building up a profile or network than just to play shows. Like that was one of the few options you had. In our very, very connected era right now, maybe that's changed a bit. But yeah, all this to ask that you guys, you said that when you were starting, you would take pretty much any show you got. Is that still an approach that you would advise?
I mean, I'd say that probably kind of go against what I was saying in this. I mean, like I definitely think you need to budget and that kind of stuff. I mean, uh, I think we're also in a very fortunate situation where I think a lot of the stuff we were being offered was good. So that's why we weren't saying no to it. You know, we're like, I think where sometimes people say no is like, oh, I need time off personally, which nothing wrong with that. Or they might say, oh, I have another commitment. We just kind of always put this before any other commitment. Like it was like we're just not going to take time off. You know, the only time we would take time off was to make an album, and it was almost so cut and dry that we had done all the touring we could possibly do. So it was a very obvious thing. Okay, now we can go make an album. You know, I think the other side to it from my own personal experience is that touring for us was also travel and the ability to travel to places that we would never else be able to go and actually play music. So the not saying no to, so like, you know, having not said no to a lot of stuff was because it was like, hey, do you want to go back to Europe? Or like, sure. You know, you want to go to Japan? Sure. Like we just, you know, that there was that side of it as well. And I think there's nothing wrong that to have some fun with it. Like it doesn't have to be all business and numbers and stuff. Like, you know, you can vacation with your own music, and that's amazing. That's like a dream come true. And the ability to not only visit those places but to be able to play music there is incredible, you know, like feat for any artist. So so that's and I think for my band in particular, we're always ones that like we love, you know, getting on a plane to play music. There's a lot of artists I know that hate it, absolutely hate it, but we love it, you know, like and it's crazy. Like we've been fortunate enough, we played Hawaii 6 times as a Canadian band. That's insane, you know, like, and every time we're like, you know, it's not about the bottom line. It's about, man, yeah, the promoter keeps wanting to have us back. we love doing it. It's like, that there's stuff like that even in 2019 we're not thinking about it. We're just saying like, yeah, we're going to do that and make it work, and then we work on making it work in the overall. You know what I mean?
Totally. Yeah, hopefully that answers it for you, Alexandria. I think, and Paul, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what you're saying is that's going to be an individual decision, and it should be made on where you're going to get value, and value isn't necessarily monetary. You can tour,
Yeah.
and there's a chance to make money. Great. We talk about high value shows too, where if you're offered a headlining date in, say, a city you've never been, well, you may end up going and playing to a thin room versus having, say, a support date in the same city for a bigger act, where all things being equal, you may not make as much money or whatnot, but it's a show that is going to bring a lot of value, a lot of attention to you. Just weigh it that way. A chance to visit Hawaii might be worth losing a few $100. Yeah.
Well,
So,
yeah, it's your personal happiness, right? So like if you have to go on tour for 2 weeks in a fun, crazy part of the world, and you come home with no money, but your expenses are covered, you might just say, yeah, that was worth it. Some people might say, no, I can't leave for 2 weeks unless I come home with money. That is a personal decision. Same thing, like you might be like, oh yeah, like we got offered the like show of our dreams, but it's only paying $200, and you're like, well, I think we'd rather go do the show than not. So that's up to you. Like it's your personal opinion. And even with taking time off too, like it's important that for any artist, if they hit a point where they're like, I need time off regardless if the dream tour shows up tomorrow, and stick with that. If that's what the ultimate feeling is, then go with it. There's nothing wrong with that. Like the fans will work with you over time, especially if you stay connected in other ways, and be creative, and then make the next tour that much more worthwhile for you and your fans. Then you'll be happier, the bond will be stronger, and you'll be more successful in the end. It's not all about pushing into yourself until you burn out. You need to have the happy balance for yourself and your personal life.
all right on. Here, we'll wrap it up. I've got one more question, but before I put it in front of Paul, I won't take any more questions publicly. If you've got any, again, aking@nwcworld.com, whether it's me sending an email to Paul after the fact, or even anyone else, say regarding the anti-spam legislation, I will get you an answer. But that said, please, again, new platform here. I've had some great feedback both about the content of the session, and it looks like, folks just weighing in on technical issues. Send me a message. Let me know how this came across, what your experience was like. It'd be very valuable to us. So last one here to close us off, Paul, and an interesting one, because you mentioned that you brought out an additional musician for When Broken is Easily Fixed 15. The question is, from a session player who joins a lot of different acts on stage, is it reasonable / appropriate for that individual to promote themselves while on tour with you? And I suppose that can mean a few different things. From networking at the merch table after the show versus throwing out your Instagram handle from the stage. But any comments or thoughts on that?
I think it just depends the act or artist or band that person is associating with. But I think just being honest and upfront about, like, hey, like, do you mind taking me in photos, and like, or do you mind if I put my other band CD at the merch table, or do you mind if I interact with other artists on the tour and look for another job, for another tour or something like that. And I think just, there's nothing wrong with that stuff. I think there's a lot of great session players that enhance every tour. And if you go to any kind of like large arena act or whatever, they always have additional musicians because they want to fill up the sound. And without those people, a lot of artists would be limited on what they could do on the stage. So it's a very important supporting role, and it's a great industry of individuals that they can do that. So the more, I think, ability for them, and for artists to be connected with them, I think is really valuable. I like, from my perspective, I would always be supportive of it. And I think if anyone were ever to come to me, like our hired musician, if he said, hey, do you mind if I like try to find a job, or do you mind if I promote myself, or do you mind whatever, I would obviously say for sure, thanks for letting me know, but that's awesome. I don't mind at all.
Right on. So there you go. Someone is hiring you, cutting the check. Put it in front of them. Can't hurt to ask. And yeah, there we go. Thank you. Thank you very much, Paul. And that's not just from me. I've got some very, very flattering comments here. Thank you, folks, for your feedback and your kind words. I'll be sure to share that with Paul once we wrap up here. Thank you for the great questions. Here we go. One more reminder, musicbooksplus.com. Take advantage. 10%, no, 20%. There's some titles there about touring. Remember, in the handouts, which I will open up here once more, you can download some great stuff that we've run in Canadian Musician over the years, or recent years, about touring. And nwcwebinars.com is the home base. You can check out all of our previous sessions, including this one, 24 hours from now, all for free. We do this for you. High tide lifts all boats. We want more artists surviving and thriving, not just on tour, but in the business as well. Paul, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Thank you to everybody who joined on, and I hope to do it again sometime. Thank you so much.
I will be taking advantage of that, I'm sure. Here, we'll sign off here, Paul. I'll look forward to hitting you up tomorrow, and have a great evening, everybody. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks so much, Andrew. Take care.